Rishi Sunak has been clear for months that when the furlough scheme ends, it ends. The cost to the Treasury and ultimately to you and me is huge, and the government says it will have to stop. The Chancellor acknowledged there will be hardship ahead for many people, but he said ending the scheme was one of the most difficult decisions he's had to make. And most reasonable people would say this is not something that can carry on forever. The former Labour Chancellor and Prime Minister Gordon Brown has urged an extension to the furlough scheme today. Alfie Stirling is Director of Research at the New Economics Foundation. Welcome to the programme. What do you say to Rishi Sunak's assertion that most reasonable people would say this is not something that can carry on forever?
Thanks for having me on,
Hi.
Eddie. Well, I think, unfortunately, Rishi Sunak has got this wrong. I mean, it's important to say, from the outset that this scheme was a really good bit of policy from the Treasury under Rishi Sunak's leadership. But the UK has now moved out of step with almost every other comparable advanced economy, particularly in Europe, who are addressing similar problems. So France, Germany, Denmark, they've all extended their schemes into 2021, and the UK is already looking like a bit of an outlier. And it's not just other countries, actually. The Treasury Select Committee in Parliament, ranging from the Trade Union Congress to the Confederation of British Industry, are all now calling for an extension. And the reason for that is that you can't develop policy like this in a vacuum. You shouldn't be setting an expiry date, like an expiry date in October, without responding to what's happening around you. And there are two particular things to respond to. One is, where are we at with the pandemic? And as your previous speaker was saying, we've now got a very concerning rise in the infection rate in this country. And if we need to ask people to step away from work for a bit in order to protect the general population, we should also be stepping in to protect them in their job. But the second thing we need to be reacting to is making sure that there are jobs in the economy. So there's no good cutting loose the support, allowing people to just sink or swim in the labour market if government isn't also stepping in to do its bit to create those jobs for the future as well.
Well, can I ask you about the international comparison? Because the British government's been at pains to say throughout this that its furlough scheme is as generous or more generous than many of our European counterparts. So to say that they're carrying on isn't comparing like with like, is it?
No, the generosity is broadly comparable to Germany, broadly comparable to Denmark, all in the region of, a wage substitution of about 60 to 80%. The UK is currently at about 70% as of September, so broadly in the same ballpark. But the difference is the length of time they're extending it for. So the UK, a hard cut-off, a hard expiry in October, and all these other countries extending it. In some cases in Germany for 12 months.
What would you recommend for an extension? Gordon Brown, among others, talking about looking at particular sectors or part-time extensions.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think it's clear that you can't have a blanket scheme indefinitely. I think nobody's advocating for that. And it's also clear that, in 12 months' time, the composition of the economy will be very different to what it was 6 months ago. And no one's, again, is arguing to return to where we were 6 months ago. Sectors like aviation, sectors like manufacturing will be different. So too will be the pattern of work, people commuting, all the rest of it. So what we need to do is be smarter, more nuanced, more targeted. And so a future scheme should be doing two things. Firstly, it should be targeted at those firms that are directly affected by an impact on COVID, either in the supply chains where there's an impact, or in those firms selling directly in a way that is affected by the pandemic. And the second is to be able to respond to when there are local lockdowns, when the government needs to compel local areas to follow more strict social distancing, that there's a furlough scheme that can step in for those areas to keep people in their jobs, but also to ensure that they have that security to not have to go and work when it might be a risk to the population to do so.